7 days postpartum. My husband left me standing on the freezing concrete outside the hospital with our newborn son. He casually tossed my overnight bag onto the curb and slid into the driver's seat of my Maybach. He told me to take the city bus home so he could use the luxury car to impress my family at a high-end dinner. He had absolutely no idea the vehicle was registered to my private equity firm, and the credit card he was currently maxing out to pay for their lavish meal was actively triggering a fraud alert on my phone. My name is Clara, 32 years old, and I spent my entire life playing the quiet, unassuming daughter while secretly building a financial empire. When my husband tried to steal my car and my mother called me a lazy burden to my face, I did not shed a single tear. I called my billionaire father and crashed their dinner. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who completely underestimated your worth. The biting wind of a New York November whipped across the hospital entrance, cutting straight through my thin sweatpants. I stood there shivering, clutching my 7-day-old son Leo tightly against my chest to shield him from the cold. Every muscle in my body ached from the grueling recovery of childbirth. But the physical pain was entirely eclipsed by the sheer staggering audacity of the man standing in front of me. Trent, my husband of 4 years, was adjusting the cuffs of a designer suit I had purchased for his birthday. He looked at me with an expression of mild annoyance, as if my presence with our newborn child was a sudden inconvenience in his busy schedule. He reached into the back seat of my Maybach, grabbed my hospital bag, and tossed it onto the freezing sidewalk. The bag hit the pavement with a heavy thud, spilling a few of my recovery supplies near my feet. "Take the 42 bus home," Trent said, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. "You always liked looking poor anyway. It fits your whole modest desk worker aesthetic. I need the Maybach tonight. I am picking up your mother and Megan for Megan's anniversary dinner, and I need to save face in front of Jamal." I stared at him, tightening the blanket around Leo. "You are leaving your wife and your 1-week-old son on the sidewalk in freezing weather so you can go to a restaurant." "Do not be dramatic, Clara," Trent scoffed, rolling his eyes. "The bus stop is right around the corner. Besides, Jamal makes mid-6 figures. I am a regional sales manager. If I show up in your rusty old Honda, your mother will never let me hear the end of it. I need this car to show them I am providing for you." Trent had always been obsessed with appearances. He spent his entire paycheck on luxury watches, tailored suits, and expensive golf club memberships he could barely afford. He thought I was just a mid-level financial analyst who preferred to live frugally. He believed the Maybach was a corporate lease provided by my employer. He had no idea that I was the founder and majority shareholder of a closed private equity fund managing over $800 million in assets. Before I could say another word, Trent slid into the driver's seat of the Maybach, revved the engine, and sped off down the avenue, leaving me entirely alone in the bitter cold. I did not cry. Crying was a useless emotion, an energy drain I could not afford. Instead, I looked down at Leo, who was sleeping peacefully against my chest, oblivious to the fact that his father had just abandoned us. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. The screen lit up with an urgent, high-priority alert from my corporate legal team. The notification was clear and alarming. Someone had just submitted a title transfer request to the Department of Motor Vehicles for the Maybach. The vehicle was legally registered to CL Holdings, my private LLC. I opened the encrypted email from my lead attorney. Attached was a scanned copy of the transfer document. Trent had forged my signature. He was attempting to transfer the title of a $200,000 corporate asset directly into his own name. A cold, razor-sharp focus settled over me. Trent was not just arrogant and cruel. He was actively committing a felony. I bypassed the rideshare apps and dialed a number I rarely used but always kept on speed dial. The phone rang exactly twice before a deep, commanding voice answered. "Clara," my father Nathaniel said, his tone instantly shifting from a boardroom bark to paternal warmth. "Are you all right? You sound like you are outside." "Dad," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Trent just left me and Leo at the hospital curb. He took the Maybach and forged my signature to transfer the title. He is heading to Le Rocher right now to buy dinner for Mom and Megan. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy loaded with a terrifying kind of power. Nathaniel was not just a father, he was a ruthless commercial real estate titan in New York. 20 years ago, my mother Cynthia had divorced him during a massive market crash that temporarily bankrupted him. She had packed her bags, taken my younger sister Megan, and left Nathaniel with nothing but debt. Cynthia had spent the next 2 decades poisoning my childhood, calling my father a penniless loser, and treating me like the scapegoat, simply because I shared his features and his quiet demeanor. Cynthia worshipped Megan, her golden child, and raised her to be just as vain and materialistic. What Cynthia absolutely failed to realize was that Nathaniel had clawed his way back from bankruptcy and built an empire that dwarfed the old money families she tried so desperately to impress. I had kept my father's wealth and my own completely hidden from them because I wanted to build my business without the shadow of nepotism and because I wanted to see who actually loved me for me. "Give me the exact location," Clara Nathaniel said, his voice dropping an octave, radiating a quiet, lethal energy. "I am at the main entrance of Mount Sinai," I replied. "Stay inside the lobby doors. I will be there in 10 minutes. Exactly 9 minutes later, a massive, custom-built armored Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a halt in front of the hospital. Two men in dark suits stepped out immediately, scanning the perimeter before opening the rear door for me. I climbed into the heated, leather-lined cabin, sinking into the plush seats as the freezing air was shut out. Nathaniel was sitting in the back wearing a bespoke charcoal suit. His face was a mask of tightly controlled fury. He looked at me, then down at Leo, his eyes softening instantly as he gently touched his grandson's tiny hand. "Are you hurt?" Nathaniel asked, his gaze snapping back to me, assessing me for any signs of physical distress. "I am fine," I said, leaning back and letting the warmth of the car thaw my freezing limbs. But Trent crossed a line that he cannot cross. He forged corporate documents, Dad. He is trying to steal the car to gift it to Megan for her anniversary. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Your mother spent my entire marriage bleeding my accounts dry to fund her vanity. I will not let a mid-level sales manager do the same to my daughter." "What is the play, Clara? Do we crush his career, or do we handle this legally?" I looked down at Leo, who was completely safe, completely warm, and entirely mine. I looked back at my father and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a private equity CEO about to liquidate a bad investment. "Take me to Le Rocher," I said, my voice steady. "That is where Trent is currently using my personal platinum card to show off to my mother and sister. I want to look them in the eye when the house of cards collapses." The drive to Le Rocher took less than 20 minutes. The restaurant was a fortress of exclusivity, a Michelin-starred establishment where reservations took 6 months to secure, and the appetizers cost more than a standard car payment. I had quietly secured a table for them weeks ago, as a favor to Trent, paying the massive deposit from my own funds. The Rolls-Royce pulled up to the valet stand. The valet, accustomed to luxury, practically ran to open the door. I stepped out, still wearing my gray sweatpants and oversized coat and holding my newborn son. The doorman looked ready to stop me, but Nathaniel stepped out right behind me. The doorman instantly recognized the real estate mogul who owned the very building the restaurant leased. He bowed his head and quickly opened the heavy oak doors. We walked through the dimly lit, opulent main dining room. I motioned for my father to hang back in the shadows near the entrance of the VIP hallway. I wanted to handle the first strike myself. I approached the heavy velvet curtains separating the private dining suite. I did not barge in immediately. I stood just out of sight, listening to the voices echoing from inside the room. "I am telling you, Jamal Trent is a godsend," my mother Cynthia was saying, her voice loud and gratingly boastful. "Clara is just a lazy desk worker. She has absolutely no ambition. Thank God Trent carries the financial burden for her, especially now that she is going to be sitting at home doing nothing with a baby." I heard the sound of silverware clinking and wine glasses being set down. Jamal, Megan's husband, spoke up. Jamal was a highly successful, incredibly sharp African-American forensic accountant. He was the only person in that room who ever used logic instead of emotion, and he always seemed to see through my mother's superficial facade. With all due respect, Cynthia Jamal said, his voice calm and analytical. Clara works in finance. The sector is highly lucrative if you know what you are doing, and I find it hard to believe Trent carries the entire burden when his base salary barely covers the mortgage on a house in their zip code. Do not be jealous, Jamal Megan chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. Trent just knows how to hustle. Speaking of which, Trent, where are the keys? I heard the heavy clatter of a metal key fob hitting the marble table. Happy 1-year anniversary. Megan. Trent said, his voice swelling with unearned pride. Take the Maybach for your weekend trip to the Hamptons. Consider it an extended rental from your favorite brother-in-law. Oh my God, Trent, Megan squealed. You are amazing. Clara would never let me touch that car. She acts like she owns it just because her company lets her drive it. I pushed the velvet curtain aside and stepped directly into the private dining room. The heavy silence that descended was instantaneous. Trent was sitting at the head of the table, a glass of expensive Bordeaux halfway to his mouth. Cynthia sat to his right, wearing a diamond necklace she had undoubtedly bought on credit. Megan was clutching the Maybach keys, her eyes wide. Jamal sat quietly on the left, his sharp eyes darting from my sweatpants to the baby in my arms, and finally to the completely calm expression on my face. Clara, Trent sputtered, nearly dropping his wine glass. The wine sloshed over the rim, staining the pristine white tablecloth. What are you doing here? I told you to go home. You cannot bring a newborn into a place like this. I walked slowly toward the table, the soft fabric of my coat brushing against the velvet chairs. I did not yell. I did not raise my voice. I simply reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a thick, officially stamped hospital invoice. Carrying the financial burden, I asked, looking directly at my mother. I dropped the invoice right in the middle of the table, perfectly obscuring Megan's view of the car keys. The paper landed with a sharp smack. Jamal, being a forensic accountant, instinctively leaned forward and read the bold print at the bottom of the page. He let out a low, impressed whistle. $15,000 paid in full today, Jamal read aloud, looking up at Trent. And the payer listed here is a personal checking account solely under the name Clara Sterling. Cynthia's jaw dropped. She stared at the invoice, then glared at Trent. You did not pay for her hospital stay. You let my daughter drain her savings. Trent's face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. He slammed his hand on the table, trying to project dominance to cover his rising panic. Clara, pick up that paper and go home right now. You are having a postpartum mental breakdown. You are embarrassing yourself in front of my family. I am not the one who should be embarrassed, Trent, I said, keeping my gaze locked on his panicked eyes. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen once. But since we are discussing finances, why do you not explain to Jamal why you tried to forge my signature on a DMV title transfer for a vehicle owned by a corporate entity? Trent froze. The muscles in his neck twitched. You are delusional, he stammered, his voice pitching higher. I bought that car. I make the payments. I did not argue with him. I did not need to. I simply turned my head toward the hallway and gave a slight nod. The heavy mahogany door to the VIP room swung open. The restaurant's general manager, a typically haughty French man named Julien, walked in. He was flanked by 2 massive security guards. Trent smirked, regaining a fraction of his false confidence. Thank goodness, Trent said, waving a hand at the manager. Julien, please escort my wife out. She is having a medical episode and needs to leave. Julien did not even look at Trent. He walked directly past him, stopped 2 feet in front of me, and bowed his head in a display of profound, unwavering respect. Good evening, Madam Sterling, the manager said, his voice entirely deferential. I apologize for the interruption. We received the directive from your corporate office regarding the financial accounts. How would you like us to handle the individuals currently occupying your table? Julien stood with his head bowed, perfectly still, while waiting for my command. Trent stared at the restaurant manager in absolute disbelief, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. Cynthia gripped the edge of the marble table so hard her knuckles turned stark white. She looked from the manager to me and then burst into a harsh, mocking laugh. You actually paid the restaurant staff to play along with your little prank. Cynthia sneered, slamming her hand down on the table. You are so petty, Clara. You show up here looking like a homeless person with that screaming baby just to embarrass your husband. Trent works incredibly hard to give you a good life, and this is how you repay him, by staging some pathetic performance to make yourself look important. I did not even blink. I adjusted Leo securely against my chest and looked at Dubois. Stand by, Julian. I told the manager quietly. I will handle this table myself for a few more minutes. As you wish, madame. Dubois replied smoothly, before stepping back into the shadows of the hallway, leaving the velvet curtains parted, just enough for my father to watch the execution unfold. Megan tossed her long blonde hair and jangled the heavy Maybach key fob directly in my face. You are ruining my anniversary dinner, Clara. You always do this. You are always so jealous of me and Jamal. Trent is a real man. He gave me this Maybach for the weekend to celebrate my first year of marriage because he knows how to treat family. You are just mad because your company gave you a nice lease and he took it. I looked at my younger sister taking in her designer dress and the smug expression she had worn since childhood. It was the exact same expression she had when I was 19 years old. You mean the exact same way you celebrated getting a brand new BMW when you failed your sophomore year of college? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. The BMW mom bought you using the entire housing stipend from my academic scholarship. You drove around campus in luxury while I worked 3 jobs and lived on instant noodles because mom told the bank she was my financial sponsor and drained the account. Cynthia scoffed loudly and waved her hand in the air. Oh, get over it, Clara. You had a full academic ride. You did not need that extra cash just to sleep in a dorm room. Megan needed a safe, reliable car to commute. Family helps family. Trent understands that concept perfectly. He knows how to share. Does he? I tilted my head and looked directly at Trent, who was now sweating profusely under his tailored suit. I wonder if Trent explained to you exactly how he managed to share a $200,000 vehicle with you tonight. Tell me, Trent. Did you gift that car to my sister by forging my signature on a Department of Motor Vehicles title transfer document at 8 o'clock this morning? The silence in the private dining room was sudden and absolute. Megan dropped the key fob onto the marble table with a loud clatter. She stared at Trent. Cynthia stopped breathing entirely. Trent jumped up from his chair, knocking his wine glass over completely. The dark red liquid spilled across the white linen. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You are crazy, Trent shouted, his voice cracking with panic. You are suffering from severe postpartum psychosis, Clara. You are hallucinating. I bought that car. I paid for it with my quarterly bonus. I am the man of the house and I provide for you. Trent let out a sharp barking laugh that echoed uncomfortably against the velvet walls of the private dining room. He ran a hand through his hair, turning to my mother and Megan with a look of exaggerated pity. Look at her, Trent said, shaking his head and gesturing toward me like I was a tragic exhibit. She is completely unhinged. The doctors warned me this might happen. Severe postpartum depression. She has lost her grip on reality. She is standing here in sweatpants holding a newborn, rambling about secret companies and prenuptial agreements. He leaned against the marble table, trying to project the aura of a patient, long-suffering husband. I bought that Maybach, Trent stated, enunciating every word for the benefit of his captive audience. I closed the biggest regional sales quarter in my company's history. I got a massive 6-figure bonus. I walked into the dealership, handed them a cashier's check, and bought that car for my family. Clara is so deeply sick and jealous of my success that she actually paid someone to fabricate these bank statements. She probably hired a hacker to send those fake DMV records to Jamal's tablet just to ruin Megan's anniversary. Megan, eager to desperately cling to the illusion of her perfect gift, immediately nodded. She crossed her arms and glared at me. Trent is right. Clara, you have always been insanely jealous of me. You cannot stand that my husband is a high-earning accountant and your husband actually provides for you while you do nothing. You faked these documents because you are having a mental breakdown. You need to be committed. Cynthia reached out and patted Trent's arm sympathetically. It is okay, Trent. We understand. She is sick. We will get her the psychiatric help she clearly needs. But you are keeping Leo. An unstable mother is a danger to her child. Trent smiled a nasty, triumphant smirk. Do you hear that, Clara? The gig is up. Your little performance is over. You do not own a private equity firm. You do not own the Maybach. You are a mid-level desk worker having a psychotic break. Now put the baby down, pick up your fake papers, and let my family enjoy our dinner. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice to argue. I simply adjusted Leo, who was still sleeping peacefully, against my chest, and turned my gaze slightly toward the heavy velvet curtains at the entrance of the room. I gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to the shadows. My father, Nathaniel, did not step into the light. He simply tapped a few keys on his encrypted smartphone. A loud, authoritative chime erupted from Jamal's tablet. Jamal, who had been listening to Trent's pathetic defense with a growing expression of professional disgust, unlocked his screen. As a forensic accountant, Jamal dealt with corporate fraud, hidden assets, and desperate liars every single day. He knew a rat when he saw one. He opened the new message. I did not hire a hacker, Trent, I said, my voice cutting through the smug satisfaction settling over my mother and sister. The documents Jamal just received did not come from an anonymous email address. They came directly from a senior partner at Sterling & Vance, one of the most ruthless corporate law firms in Manhattan. Jamal's eyes widened behind his glasses as he scrolled through the newly delivered files. The forensic accountant in him could not resist the absolute destruction of Trent's financial lies. Trent, you might want to stop talking right now, Jamal warned, his voice stripped of any familial warmth. Because I am currently looking at a direct secure portal link to the New York State Division of Corporations. This is not a PDF. This is the live active state registry. Jamal rotated his tablet so the glowing screen faced the center of the table. CL Holdings is a registered active entity in the state of New York, Jamal read aloud, emphasizing every syllable. Assets under management exceed $800 million. The sole executive officer and controlling shareholder is Clara Sterling. You, Trent, have zero equity. You are not on the board. You are not an employee. You have absolutely no legal connection to this holding company or the Maybach registered under its name. Jamal swiped the screen to the next document. And as for your massive sales bonus, Jamal continued, his tone turning razor sharp. I am now looking at your actual W-2 and your company's latest payroll filings. Your regional sales numbers have been in a steady decline for 3 consecutive quarters. You did not receive a 6-figure bonus. You received a performance warning. Your base salary is exactly $85,000 a year. You could not afford the sales tax on a Maybach, let alone buy one in cash. The silence in the room was absolute and suffocating. The reality of the situation crashed down on the table like a concrete block. Trent was not a high-rolling provider. He was a struggling, failing middle manager who had spent the last 6 months embezzling money from his wife to fund a gambling addiction and an affair with a 22-year-old intern. And he had just tried to steal a $200,000 corporate vehicle by forging federal documents. Trent's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The smug, arrogant mask melted away, leaving behind the terrified face of a man who realized he was about to lose his freedom, his marriage, and his entire livelihood in one night. He looked at the door as if calculating the distance and his chances of simply running away. Megan dropped her head into her hands, the illusion of her perfect anniversary gift completely shattered. She realized the expensive car she was just bragging about was stolen property, and her beloved brother-in-law was a broke fraud. But Cynthia refused to surrender. My mother had spent her entire life worshipping men with the illusion of wealth and tearing me down to make herself feel superior. Accepting that I was a multimillionaire CEO while her favorite son-in-law was a common thief would completely destroy her fragile narcissistic worldview. Cynthia slammed both of her hands flat onto the marble table, rattling the silverware and the empty wine glasses. She shot out of her chair, her face contorted with pure, unadulterated rage. She did not attack Trent for lying. She did not attack Trent for stealing. She aimed all of her vitriol directly at me. "How dare you!" Cynthia screamed, her voice shrill and echoing off the walls. "How dare you sit there and humiliate your husband like this? So what if the car is in your company's name? You are a married couple. Trent has sacrificed the best years of his life putting up with your cold, unloving personality. He has every right to take what he needs to keep this family afloat. I stared at my mother, completely unfazed by her screaming. He stole $100,000 to pay for a mistress and a casino habit, I reminded her calmly. Cynthia waved her hand frantically, completely dismissing the affair and the embezzlement. Men make mistakes when they are stressed, Cynthia yelled. If you were a better wife, if you paid more attention to his needs instead of hoarding millions of dollars in secret companies, he would not have to look for comfort somewhere else. You set him up to fail, Clara. You hid your wealth to make him feel small. You are a terrible wife and a selfish daughter. You are going to apologize to Trent, hand over those keys to your sister, and fix this mess right now. The sheer audacity of her defense hung in the air. She was willing to excuse adultery, grand larceny, and abandonment, all to protect the ego of a man who had left her own grandson shivering on a freezing sidewalk. I looked at Cynthia, then at Trent, and finally at Megan. The room was a perfect contained echo chamber of their own toxic delusion. Fix this mess, I asked, my voice dropping to a low, icy calm. Oh, Mom, I am not here to fix the mess. I am here to completely eradicate it. Cynthia slammed her hand on the marble table again, the sharp crack echoing loudly against the velvet walls of the private dining room. She simply could not comprehend what I had just said about the prenuptial agreement. To her, legal contracts were just annoying pieces of paper that could easily be bullied out of existence with enough shouting and emotional manipulation. She physically stepped in front of Trent, shielding the grown man like a mother bear protecting her cub. A prenuptial agreement means absolutely nothing, Cynthia screeched, her face contorted with desperation and rage. Her diamond necklace, bought on credit, sparkled hypocritically under the chandelier. You are married, Clara. In the eyes of the law and this family, what is yours is his. Trent is your husband. He is the head of this household. He has worked his fingers to the bone providing for you while you played dress-up at whatever little office job you claim to have. I looked at my mother, feeling a profound sense of detachment. The sheer, blinding delusion was breathtaking. She hated her own ex-husband for losing his fortune, but she practically worshipped Trent simply because he projected a flimsy illusion of wealth. He has kept a roof over your head, she continued, her voice reaching a fever pitch as she pointed a manicured finger at my face. He has fed you, clothed you, and tolerated your miserable, ungrateful attitude. He is the only reason you are not living on the streets. If he wants to take a car from your company to give to his sister-in-law as a gift, he has every right to do so. It is marital property, Clara. He earned that right by taking care of you for all these years. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend my career, my bank accounts, or my value. I simply reached into the oversized tote bag hanging from my shoulder. Taking care of me, I asked, keeping my tone deadly flat. Let us look at exactly how Trent has been taking care of this family. I pulled out a thick, bound stack of bank statements printed on heavy, watermarked paper. I tossed the entire stack onto the table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud right next to the forged DMV papers and the spilled red wine. Trent stared at the stack of papers. The remaining color drained completely from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost in a tailored suit. He made a weak, pathetic grabbing motion toward the documents, but Jamal smoothly intercepted them. Jamal pulled the stack toward his side of the table, out of Trent's reach. When we got married, Trent insisted we open a joint checking account for household expenses and emergencies. I explained, addressing the room, but keeping my eyes locked on Trent's panicked face. He claimed it was the traditional thing to do. He promised to deposit a portion of his salary every single month to build a nest egg. I agreed to fund the account initially with $200,000 of my own money to cover our mortgage, utilities, and future expenses for our child. Cynthia crossed her arms, jutting her chin out defensively. So what? That is what a good wife does. You support your husband financially when you can. A good husband does not use a joint family account as his personal limitless ATM. I shot back, my voice turning to ice. Over the last 6 months, while I was heavily pregnant with his son, enduring severe morning sickness, and simultaneously managing an $800 million fund, Trent did not deposit a single cent into that account. I pointed at the top page of the statement resting in Jamal's hands. Instead, he treated my money like a slush fund. I continued relentlessly. While he was telling all of you about his massive sales bonuses and his huge commissions, his actual paychecks were barely covering his luxury car leases and expensive country club memberships. So to fund his fake lifestyle and impress you, he started siphoning cash directly from the account intended for our newborn baby. Trent backed away, his shoulders hitting the wall. Megan looked horrified, her grip on the Maybach keys loosening. Cynthia opened her mouth to argue, but I refused to let her speak. He made 25 separate wire transfers. I stated, my voice echoing in the silent room. Small amounts at first. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Always categorized under vague, innocent-sounding labels like home improvement or investment portfolio. But by the end of my third trimester, he had completely drained $100,000 of my money. He was probably investing it for your future, Cynthia yelled desperately, grasping at straws to protect the image of her perfect son-in-law. Trent is a smart businessman. He knows how to multiply wealth. You probably just do not understand his complex financial strategy. You are trying to make him look bad over a standard investment. Jamal let out a sharp, dark laugh. He adjusted his glasses. His eyes locked onto the columns of numbers and payee names printed on the statements. As a forensic accountant, he read bank statements the way normal people read a novel. To him, numbers told a story, and this specific story was an absolute tragedy. "This is not an investment strategy," Cynthia Jamal said, his voice laced with pure professional disgust. "Unless investing in offshore digital casinos is a new wealth management trend, $60,000 of this money was routed through a dummy shell company directly to a gambling syndicate in Macau." Megan gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Cynthia stumbled back a step, finally speechless. "He has a severe gambling addiction," I stated flatly, ensuring every word landed with maximum impact. "He lost $60,000 playing digital blackjack while I was picking out cribs, buying diapers, and carrying his child." Trent looked like he was going to be physically sick. He looked desperately at Megan, trying to find an ally in the room. "Megan, please, you have to believe me," Trent pleaded, his voice cracking. "It was a mistake. I was stressed from work. I was trying to hit a jackpot to buy us all a vacation house in the Hamptons. I was doing it for the family. I just wanted to provide more." Jamal did not even look at him. He flipped to the second page of the bank statement, his eyes scanning the remaining $40,000 of unaccounted funds. He traced the routing numbers with his index finger, his brow furrowing in deep concentration. "And the other $40,000, Jamal murmured, almost to himself. He ran his finger down the list of domestic wire transfers. These payments were sent weekly. Exactly $2,000 every Friday, labeled meticulously as consulting fees. Jamal's finger stopped abruptly on a specific line item near the bottom of the page. The air in the room seemed to instantly vanish. His posture went completely rigid. He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, leaning closer to the paper, as if he could not believe what he was seeing. "Wait a minute," Jamal said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, deadly quiet register. He looked up, his eyes locking onto Trent with a terrifying intensity. The calm, analytical accountant was entirely gone, replaced by a man looking at a mortal enemy. "These weekly consulting fees," Jamal said, his voice vibrating with suppressed rage. "They are not going to a consulting firm. They are routed directly to a personal domestic checking account under the name Alexis Thorne." The name hung in the air, heavy, toxic, and lethal. Megan dropped the Maybach keys. They hit the floor with a sharp metallic clatter. The color drained from her face, leaving her completely ashen. She looked at Jamal, then at Trent, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization. Alexis Thorne was not just a random name. It was the name of the 22-year-old intern who had supposedly been fired from Trent's office last month. Trent let out a pathetic, strangled whimper. He sank to the floor, his knees giving out completely, burying his face in his trembling hands. He knew his life was officially over. For exactly 10 seconds, the private dining room was dead silent. The only sound was the faint, muffled jazz music playing from the main restaurant and the heavy, ragged breathing of my husband groveling on the expensive carpet. Megan stood completely frozen, staring at the man she had idolized just minutes ago, her anniversary ruined by the ugly truth. Jamal adjusted his glasses and took a deliberate step back, physically distancing himself from the pathetic display. But a narcissist never stays on the floor for long. When cornered, their panic always morphs into blinding, vicious rage. Trent suddenly scrambled to his feet. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing sweat across his forehead. His expression contorted from desperate panic into pure, unadulterated hatred. He straightened his ruined designer suit, his chest heaving as he glared at me. The mask of the charming, successful provider was completely stripped away, revealing the vicious parasite underneath. "You think you are so smart?" Trent sneered, his voice dropping to a harsh, venomous hiss. "You think you can just humiliate me in front of my family and walk away? You set this whole thing up. You hired an investigator to track my bank accounts while you were sitting at home pregnant. You are sick, Clara. You are a manipulative, paranoid, crazy woman." He took a step toward me, his hands balled into tight fists. I did not flinch. I held Leo securely against my chest and stared right back at him. My absolute refusal to react only fueled his blind fury. "Fine," Trent shouted, throwing his arms in the air. "You want to play it this way? We are done. I am filing for divorce the second the courts open tomorrow morning. You think you have won because you embarrassed me. You have not won anything. I am going to bleed you dry." Cynthia, who had been completely silenced by the revelation of the mistress, suddenly perked up. The word divorce seemed to reboot her system. She instantly aligned herself with Trent, desperately clinging to the only person who validated her own toxic worldview. "He is right, Clara," Cynthia snapped, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You pushed him to this. You drove your own husband away with your cold, calculating behavior. And New York is a 50-50 state. Trent is legally entitled to half of everything you own." Trent let out a loud, manic laugh, emboldened by my mother's instant support. "That is right." He pointed to the floor. "I will take half of this ridiculous private equity firm you have been hiding. And more importantly, I am forcing the sale of our house. That Beacon Hill estate is marital property. We bought it after we got married. I will take my 50% equity and you will be out on the street. Good luck finding a new place to live while you are a single mother with a ruined reputation." He paced back and forth, building a delusional momentum. His ego was frantically constructing a scenario where he still walked away as the ultimate victor. He looked at Jamal, expecting validation, but Jamal just stared at him like he was a specimen in a lab. "And do not even think about trying to keep my son," Trent roared, pivoting back to me and jabbing his finger in the air. "I am taking full custody of Leo. You are completely unhinged, Clara. Any judge will take one look at you and see the truth. You barged into a 5-star restaurant in the freezing cold wearing sweatpants and carrying a newborn baby just to stage some psychotic revenge plot. You are suffering from severe postpartum psychosis. You are a mentally unstable, unfit mother. I will easily prove that you are a danger to our child." Cynthia moved to stand right next to Trent, nodding vigorously. "She is having a mental breakdown," Cynthia declared loudly, ensuring everyone in the room heard her official diagnosis. "I can testify to it in court, Trent. She has always been emotionally unstable. She is completely unfit to raise a child by herself. We will make sure Leo goes to a safe home with his father." The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of my own mother volunteering to help a cheating, embezzling thief take my newborn son away from me should have hurt. A younger version of me would have crumbled under the weight of that betrayal. But the woman standing in that private dining room was entirely different. I had shed my need for her approval years ago. I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, surgical clarity. Trent stood there panting, a smug, triumphant smirk returning to his face. He actually believed his threats were landing. He thought using my child as a psychological hostage would force me to back down, apologize, and surrender my assets just to keep my baby. He expected me to cry, to beg, to negotiate. Instead, I walked calmly past him. I moved to the large marble dining table, stepping over the spilled wine and the discarded Maybach keys. I picked up a heavy crystal pitcher filled with ice water. I selected a clean glass and poured the water, the sound of the ice clinking loudly in the tense, silent room. I took my time. I raised the glass to my lips and took a slow, refreshing sip. The cold water felt perfect against my dry throat. I set the glass down gently on a dry spot on the tablecloth. I turned around and looked at Trent. I let a slow, chilling smile spread across my face. I set the glass down gently. "Call your lawyer, Trent," I said. "Put him on speaker. Let him explain exactly what you signed." Trent shook his head violently, his eyes darting between me, Jamal, and the stack of bank statements. He refused to accept the reality of his own demise. He pointed a shaking finger at Jamal, his face flushed with a desperate manic energy. "You are lying." Trent spat saliva flying from his lips. "You are all in on this. Clara put you up to this. She printed those fake documents to scare me into walking away quietly. But I am not stupid. I know my rights. I know the law in New York. A judge will take one look at this and grant me 50% of everything she has hidden from me. I am calling my lawyer right now. He will shut this down." I gestured gracefully toward his pockets with my free hand. By all means, I offered my voice perfectly level. "Call him. Put him on speakerphone. Let us all hear exactly what your highly paid attorney thinks about your brilliant legal strategy." Trent frantically dug into his suit jacket, pulling out his smartphone. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the device twice before he managed to unlock it. He scrolled through his contacts, his breathing heavy and ragged in the silent room. He found the name and hit the call button, aggressively tapping the speaker icon so the entire dining room could hear. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed off the high ceilings, ratcheting up the tension until it was almost unbearable. Finally, a gruff, irritated voice answered on the other end of the line. Marcus, Trent blurted out before the lawyer could even offer a greeting. "Marcus, listen to me. I have an emergency. My wife has completely lost her mind. She is trying to claim that our house and the cars belong to some secret corporate entity she owns. She is threatening to cut me out of the marital assets and leave me with nothing. Tell her she is delusional. Tell her I am legally entitled to half of her hidden company and half of the equity in our home." There was a long, heavy sigh on the other end of the phone. Marcus did not sound like a bulldog attorney ready to go to war. He sounded like a man who was profoundly exhausted by his client's stupidity. Trent Marcus said, his voice slow and deliberate. "Are you referring to the prenuptial agreement you brought to my office 3 years ago? The one you signed against my explicit legal advice?" "Yes," Trent snapped impatiently. "The prenup, it is a standard template. It only protects what she had before the marriage. Everything we bought after the wedding is joint property. Tell her that." "Trent, I am going to need you to listen to me very carefully," Marcus replied, his tone chillingly precise. "That document was not a standard template. It was a customized, ironclad fortress drafted by Sterling and Vance. I begged you not to sign it. I told you that the Corporate Asset Protection Clause was the most aggressive legal structure I had ever seen. You told me you did not care because you wanted to prove you were marrying her for love, not her money. You insisted on signing it right there in the lobby so you could go play golf." Trent's face lost all its remaining color. "What does that mean?" he demanded, his voice cracking with rising panic. "What does the clause say?" "It says that any asset purchased, maintained, or leveraged using funds generated by CL Holdings or any of its subsidiaries is legally classified as separate non-marital property," Marcus explained, emphasizing every brutal word. "It explicitly states that the commingling of these funds into joint accounts does not convert them into marital assets. If your house was purchased with corporate funds, you do not own it. If the vehicles were purchased with corporate funds, you do not own them. She insulated her entire net worth. You have zero equity in her holding company, and you have zero equity in the real estate." "But I am her husband!" Trent yelled, his voice echoing shrilly in the private dining room. "I am entitled to spousal support. I am entitled to alimony to maintain the lifestyle I have grown accustomed to. I will sue her for maintenance." Another heavy, agonizing sigh came through the speaker. "Did you violate the morality clause?" Trent Marcus asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Trent froze. He glanced at me, his eyes wide with absolute terror. What are you talking about? Section 4, paragraph B. Marcus recited from memory. The infidelity clause. It dictates that if either party commits adultery, embezzles funds, or engages in financial fraud against the other spouse during the marriage, they immediately forfeit all rights to spousal support, alimony, and division of shared liquid assets. They also forfeit the right to have their legal fees covered by the opposing party. So I am going to ask you one more time, Trent. Did you have an affair? Does she have proof? Trent could not speak. He looked at Jamal, who was still holding the bank statements detailing the $60,000 sent to a casino and the $40,000 sent to the 22-year-old intern named Alexis Thorne. The paper trail was flawless. The proof was indisputable. Marcus Trent whispered, his voice trembling so violently he sounded like a frightened child. She has bank statements. She knows about the money. She knows about Alexis. The silence from the phone was deafening. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was entirely devoid of sympathy. If she has the receipts, Trent, then you are a dead man walking, Marcus stated flatly. The infidelity clause activates immediately. You are entitled to absolutely nothing. You are walking away with exactly what you brought into this marriage. In fact, if she decides to pursue civil litigation for the embezzled funds, you will likely owe her money. I cannot help you fight a battle that was lost 3 years ago. Do not call this number again unless you figure out how to pay my $200,000 retainer in cash, because your wife will certainly not be paying it for you. The line went dead with a sharp click. The dial tone buzzed loudly in the silent room, sounding exactly like a flatlining heartbeat. Trent's hands shook uncontrollably. The smartphone slipped from his trembling grip and hit the marble floor with a loud crack, the screen splintering into a spiderweb of broken glass. He stared at the shattered phone, the reality of his total destruction finally settling into his bones. He had no house, he had no car, he had no money, he had no legal recourse. He had played a dangerous game of deception against a woman who held every single card, and he had lost everything. Cynthia stood frozen in place. Her mouth hung open, but no words came out. The aggressive narcissistic mother, who had spent her entire life worshipping the illusion of wealth, was experiencing a catastrophic system failure. Her brain simply could not process the scene unfolding in front of her. Her golden boy, the wealthy, successful executive she had constantly used to belittle me, was a fraud. He was a broke, cheating, embezzling thief who had just been legally annihilated by the daughter she had always deemed a failure. Cynthia clutched her chest, her eyes darting frantically around the room, desperately looking for an alternate reality that did not exist. Megan physically reacted to the shifting power dynamic. She took a slow, unsteady step backward, her expensive heels scraping softly against the carpet. She looked at Trent, a man she had idolized and secretly coveted, now reduced to a pathetic, trembling mess on the floor. Then she looked at me. For the first time in her life, Megan really looked at me. She saw the calm, unbothered posture. She saw the absolute lack of fear. She realized that while she had spent years bragging about leased cars and heavily financed designer bags, I had been quietly managing an $800 million empire. The staggering, incomprehensible weight of my wealth and power seemed to physically crush her. She realized her entire identity, her entire sense of superiority was built on a pathetic illusion. I could buy and sell her entire life without even checking my bank balance. She took another step back, retreating into the shadows of the dining room, wanting nothing more than to disappear completely. I took another slow sip of my ice water, savoring the absolute silence. I placed the glass back onto the table, the sharp clink cutting through the heavy air. "I think we are done here, Trent," I said, my voice perfectly clear and resolute. "You have until tomorrow morning to remove your personal belongings from my house. Do not try to take anything that belongs to me, or I will have you arrested for theft on top of the fraud charges. My lawyers will send the divorce papers to whatever cheap motel you end up sleeping in." Trent fell to his knees. The arrogance was completely eradicated, replaced by a desperate, groveling panic. "Clara, please," he sobbed, reaching his hands out toward me. "It was a mistake. I was sick. I have an addiction. I will go to rehab. I will end it with Alexis. I love you. We have a son. You cannot just throw me away. We are a family. I looked down at the man kneeling on the floor, feeling a profound sense of closure. We were never a family, Trent, I replied coldly. You were just a bad investment, and I am cutting my losses. The sharp, violent crack of flesh hitting flesh echoed like a gunshot through the private dining room. Trent reeled backward, clutching his cheek. Megan stood over him, her chest heaving, her hand still raised in the air. The heavy diamond anniversary ring Trent had given her earlier that evening caught the light, and for a second I wondered if the stone had cut his face. You absolute parasite! Megan hissed, her voice vibrating with a hatred so deep it seemed to shake her entire frame. You sat at my dining table every Sunday. You let me brag about your promotions. You let me mock my own sister for marrying you. And all this time you were using stolen money to play sugar daddy to an intern who is barely old enough to drink. Megan. Please, Trent gasped, scrambling backward on the carpet like a cornered rat. You have to understand the pressure I was under. Do not say my name! Megan screamed, kicking her discarded Maybach key fob directly at his chest. It bounced off his ruined suit. You made me an accessory to grand larceny. You let me drive a stolen $200,000 car through Manhattan. If Clara presses charges, I could be arrested for possession of stolen property. You set me up to take the fall. Actually, Megan, it is significantly worse than that, Jamal interjected. Jamal stepped into the center of the room. He picked up the stack of bank statements from the marble table, adjusting his glasses. The forensic accountant was fully activated, and he was not going to let Trent leave this room with a single shred of dignity intact. Jamal had spent years watching Trent belittle him for being a boring numbers guy while Trent paraded around as the flashy executive. Now the numbers guy was executing him. Jamal flipped to the final page of the dossier, running his finger down a column of tiny encrypted transaction codes. Trent did not just siphon $100,000 from Clara's joint account. Jamal explained, his voice projecting the calm, clinical authority of a medical examiner conducting an autopsy. To set up the offshore routing numbers for the Macau casino and to secure the lease on the luxury penthouse for Lexi, the intern Trent needed a secondary guarantor. He needed someone with unblemished credit and a physical real estate asset to put down as collateral. Since Clara kept all her assets locked behind CL Holdings, Trent could not use her name. Jamal looked up, fixing his gaze directly on my mother. He used yours, Cynthia, Jamal stated flatly. Cynthia froze. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a wax statue. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. According to these wire transfers and the attached lease agreements, Trent forged your signature. Cynthia, Jamal continued relentlessly. He listed your Beacon Hill estate as collateral to secure a line of credit for the penthouse. He also opened 3 high-limit credit cards in your name to furnish the apartment for Lexi. You are currently personally liable for over $80,000 in luxury furniture, diamond jewelry, and unpaid casino debts. The silence that followed was absolute. Cynthia looked at Trent, the man she had endlessly praised, the man she had used as a weapon to tear me down, the man she had just violently defended 5 minutes ago, claiming he had every right to steal from me because he was the head of the household. Trent raised his hands defensively, his eyes wide with terror as he looked at my mother. Cynthia, I was going to pay it back, he stammered, his voice squeaking. I just needed a bridge loan. The casino algorithm was about to hit. I was going to double the money and pay off the cards before you ever saw a statement. Cynthia let out a sound that was less human and more like a wounded animal. She lunged forward. She did not slap him like Megan did. She grabbed her heavy brass-clasped Chanel handbag and swung it with all her might, smashing it directly into the side of Trent's head. Trent yelped in pain, falling onto his side. You stole from me! Cynthia shrieked, swinging the bag again, hitting him in the shoulder. I defended you. I treated you like a son. I told everyone at the country club how successful you were, and you stole my credit. You put a lien on my house to buy a bed for a 22-year-old tramp. I will kill you, Trent. I will testify against you myself. I will watch the judge lock you in a cell. Trent scrambled on his hands and knees, trying to crawl toward the doorway to escape the barrage of blows. Megan did not step in to help him. She actually kicked his leg as he crawled past her, her face twisted in pure disgust. The beautiful, toxic alliance they had maintained for years was completely pulverized. They were no longer a united front against me. They were a pack of starving wolves turning on each other the second the meat ran out. Cynthia stopped swinging her bag, panting heavily. She smoothed down her designer dress, her chest heaving as she tried to regain her composure. She looked at Trent cowering near the door, then turned her gaze to me. Instantly, her expression shifted. The rage vanished, replaced by a sickeningly sweet, panicked smile. She took a step toward me, reaching her hands out as if she wanted to hug me. "Clara, my sweet girl." Cynthia cooed, her voice trembling with fake affection. "We are the victims here. Do you see what this monster has done to us? He manipulated all of us. You have to call your lawyers at Sterling and Vance. You have to tell them to fix my credit. You have to pay off this debt he put in my name. We are family, Clara. Blood is thicker than water. We have to stick together and destroy him." I looked at my mother. The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of her pivot was almost impressive. 10 minutes ago, she was demanding I hand over a $200,000 car to her favorite daughter and apologize for humiliating a thief. Now that her own wallet was on the line, I was suddenly her sweet girl again. I stepped back, ensuring her manicured hands did not touch me. "Blood is thicker than water." I repeated, my voice deadly calm. "Is that the same blood that made you drain my academic scholarship account when I was 19 years old?" Cynthia flinched, her fake smile faltering. "Clara, that was in the past. I had to buy Megan a car for college. It was a family emergency. You stole my housing stipend so Megan could drive a brand new BMW while she failed her sophomore classes." I stated, the old memories fueling the cold fire in my chest. "I worked 3 jobs and lived on instant noodles in a damp basement apartment. When I begged you for help because I could not afford textbooks, you told me that successful people figure out how to survive without asking for handouts." I shifted Leo in my arms, standing tall, projecting the absolute authority of the $800 million empire I had built from the ground up. "So figure it out, Cynthia," I said, my voice echoing with finality. "You want to praise Trent's financial genius. You want to defend his right to take what he wants to support his lifestyle. Congratulations. You are now the primary investor in his luxury penthouse and his gambling addiction. You can pay the $80,000 yourself." "But Clara," Cynthia gasped, tears of genuine panic welling in her eyes. "I cannot afford that. They will put a lien on the house. They will ruin my social standing." "You should have thought about your social standing before you decided to co-sign a life with a parasite," I replied. I turned to Jamal, who was standing quietly watching the execution with a look of profound respect. "Jamal, please forward the entire forensic dossier, including the forged signatures and the casino wire transfers, to my legal team at Sterling and Vance," I instructed clearly. "Tell Marcus to file the divorce papers, the fraud charges, and the embezzlement suit the second the courthouse opens." "With pleasure," Clara, Jamal replied, tapping the screen of his tablet. "Consider it done." I did not look at Trent, who was still sobbing near the door. I did not look at Megan, who was staring at the floor in absolute defeat. I did not look at my mother, who was hyperventilating over her ruined credit score. I turned my back on all of them, the heavy velvet curtains parting as I stepped out of the private dining room and into the quiet, dimly lit hallway where my father was waiting. He took one look at my calm expression and gave a slow, approving nod. The dead weight of my past was finally severed, and I had never felt lighter. The brief moment of tranquility in the hallway lasted exactly 3 seconds. My father had just offered me a warm, reassuring smile when the muffled sounds of crying from inside the private dining room abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and unnatural. Jamal stepped through the velvet curtains right behind me, tightly gripping the thick leather binder containing the printed copies of Trent's forensic financial audit. Then came the roar. It was a guttural, feral sound of pure, unhinged desperation. The heavy velvet curtains were violently ripped apart. Trent burst into the dimly lit hallway, his face twisted into a mask of absolute blinding fury. The pathetic, sobbing man from moments ago had vanished. He had realized that begging would not work, so his narcissistic brain defaulted to the only other weapon it possessed: violence. Give me that file, Trent screamed, his eyes locked onto the leather binder in Jamal's hands. You are not walking out of here with my life. I will destroy every single page. He lunged. He was much larger than Jamal, and his desperation gave him a terrifying momentum. He threw his entire body weight forward, reaching out to grab the documents, his face flushed red with exertion. I did not flinch. I held Leo securely against my chest, completely unbothered by the charging man. My father stepped forward to intercept him, but someone else moved much faster. Before Trent could even lay a finger on the binder, two massive figures materialized from the alcoves of the corridor. They were the restaurant's private security detail, dressed in immaculate tailored black suits with discreet earpieces. They moved with terrifying speed and surgical precision. The first guard grabbed Trent by the collar of his ruined designer jacket and forcefully spun him around. The second guard swept Trent's legs out from under him. Trent hit the floor with a loud, sickening thud. Before he could even process the pain, the guards hauled him up and slammed him face first onto a heavy mahogany credenza lining the hallway wall. They pinned his arms painfully behind his back, pressing his face flat against the cold, polished wood. "Get off me!" Trent roared, thrashing wildly against the unyielding grip of the two massive men. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am a VIP guest. I spend tens of thousands of dollars at this establishment every year. Unhand me right now, or I will sue this restaurant into bankruptcy. I will have your jobs." The guards did not even blink. They held him pinned to the wood, completely indifferent to his empty threats. Cynthia and Megan spilled out of the dining room, drawn by the commotion. They froze in the hallway, watching in sheer horror as the man they had idolized was treated like a common street thug. Cynthia clutched her diamond necklace, her eyes wide with shock. Megan looked like she might be physically sick. "Julian!" Trent screamed down the hallway, spotting the restaurant's general manager approaching rapidly. "Julian, tell these apes to release me immediately. My crazy wife orchestrated this entire scene. Kick her out. Throw them all out onto the street. Put the entire bill for tonight on my black card and let me go." Julian, a meticulously groomed man in a sharp charcoal suit, walked gracefully down the corridor. He was the gatekeeper of the city's most exclusive dining experience, a man known for his flawless composure and ability to handle the most demanding billionaires. Julian stopped walking. He did not look at Trent. He did not offer Trent an apology. He did not acknowledge Trent's screaming at all. Instead, Julian turned entirely away from the man pinned to the credenza. He faced me, smoothed the front of his suit jacket, and bowed deeply. "I sincerely apologize for the disturbance, Madam," Julian said, his voice ringing with absolute, unwavering respect. Security had him flagged the moment he raised his voice. "I hope you and the young master were not frightened." The hallway went dead silent. The only sound was Trent's heavy, ragged breathing as his brain desperately tried to process what he had just heard. "Madam," Cynthia whispered, her voice cracking, "why is the general manager calling you Madam? Trent is the VIP. Trent got us this reservation." Julian finally turned his head to look at my mother, his expression a mask of polite disdain. "With all due respect, ma'am," Julian replied smoothly. "Mr. Trent has never been a VIP here. We have simply accommodated his reservation requests because he happens to be married to the owner." Megan let out a sharp gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. I stepped closer to the credenza, looking down at Trent's horrified face, pressed against the mahogany. "You love bragging about your status here, Trent," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet hallway like a scalpel. "You loved bringing your golf buddies and your interns here, showing off how you could command the best table by the window. You thought you were so powerful because the staff always addressed you by name." I tilted my head, letting a cold smile touch my lips. "You were too busy showing off to actually read the financial disclosures I left on my desk 2 years ago," I continued. "You did not know that CL Holdings bought this entire restaurant group when they were facing bankruptcy. I renovated this building. I hired Julian. I own every single chair, table, and crystal glass in this establishment. I am not a guest here, Trent. I am the boss. And you just tried to physically assault my brother-in-law in my own building." Trent stared at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot. The absolute magnitude of his ignorance was finally crushing him. He had been playing the role of a wealthy titan inside a kingdom that I had built and owned. Julian stepped forward holding a sleek black leather billfold. He opened it, revealing the itemized receipt for the anniversary dinner. Furthermore, Madame Julian addressed me, keeping his posture perfectly straight. We received an automated notification from our merchant services 5 minutes ago. All of Mr. Trent's financial accounts, including his primary credit cards, have been frozen by his banking institution due to suspected fraudulent activity. Julian casually snapped the leather folder shut. The total for tonight's private dining experience is $8,400, Julian stated. Since his cards are effectively useless, how would you like us to handle this outstanding balance, madam? Should we write it off as a business expense, or would you prefer I hand the bill to his mother-in-law? Cynthia flinched as if she had been struck by lightning. She took 3 rapid steps backward, physically distancing herself from the $8,000 dinner she had just spent 2 hours enjoying. "Do not look at me," Cynthia shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly down the corridor. "I am not paying for his extravagant lifestyle. He already ruined my credit. I will not give him another dime." I looked at my mother, watching her frantic, desperate retreat. She had spent the entire evening mocking my clothes, my career, and my life. She had practically demanded I hand over my assets to her favorite daughter just to keep the peace. Now faced with a simple dinner bill, she was running away like a coward. I turned my attention back to the general manager. "Hold him for the officers, Julian. Marcus is already on his way. Have him arrested for trespassing, attempted assault, and theft of services. He just consumed $8,000 worth of fine dining with frozen assets. Let him explain his brilliant financial strategy to a judge." Trent let out a strangled, pathetic wail. The security guards tightened their grip, preparing to haul him toward the service elevator. "Clara, you cannot do this." Trent begged, tears streaming down his face, completely abandoning any remaining shred of his ego. "Please. The police will ruin my career. I will never get another job in finance. I will have a criminal record." "You do not have a career, Trent," I reminded him, my voice completely devoid of pity. "You are an embezzler who blew his savings on offshore casinos and a 22-year-old intern. Your reputation was dead the second you decided to steal from me. The police are just the final formality." I turned away from him and looked at Megan. She was trembling, staring at the extravagant restaurant around her, finally comprehending the devastating reality of my power. She had spent her entire life trying to outshine me, trying to prove she was the successful, glamorous sister. Today, she learned that while she was busy playing dress-up, I had bought the entire theater. "Jamal, make sure the police get a copy of that dossier when they arrive," I said, adjusting Leo's blanket. I looked at my father, who offered me his arm. I took it gracefully. We walked down the hallway, the sound of Trent crying and begging echoing behind us, slowly fading away as we stepped out into the crisp, refreshing night air. The empire I built was finally clean. But toxic people never know when a battle is truly over. The heavy glass doors of the main lobby were just inches away when the frantic, sharp clicking of heels echoed against the marble floor behind me. "Clara, wait right there." Megan's voice was shrill, vibrating with a desperate, unhinged energy. My father paused, his hand resting lightly on the brass handle of the exit door. I turned slowly, holding Leo against my shoulder, to see my sister marching down the corridor. Her face was flushed, her makeup was smeared from her earlier tears, but her eyes blazed with arrogant defiance. She simply could not handle being the loser in a room where she had always been the undisputed star. She stopped a few feet away from me, her chest heaving. With a violent jerk of her hands, she reached behind her neck and unclasped the heavy, glittering necklace she had been parading around all evening. She thrust it into the air, holding it up like a shield against my success. "You think you are so superior?" Clara Megan screamed, her voice echoing through the quiet, opulent lobby. "You think you have won because you humiliated Trent? So what if you own a restaurant? So what if you took back your stupid Maybach? I do not need your charity." She took a step closer, waving the jewelry in my face. "Jamal makes millions of dollars a year," Megan yelled, her voice cracking with desperation. "He is a senior partner at his firm. He buys me real diamonds. He provides a lifestyle you could only dream of before you started hiding money. We do not need your cars or your restaurants. We have real wealth. I did not say a word. I did not have to. Jamal stepped out from the shadowy corridor of the private dining wing, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He stopped right behind his wife. He did not look angry. He looked entirely hollowed out, like a man staring at a stranger he had mistakenly allowed into his home. "You should put that away, Megan," Jamal said, his voice dropping to a flat, chilling monotone. "Unless you want everyone to see how easily it scratches glass." Megan froze, her arms, still holding the necklace aloft, trembled slightly. She slowly lowered her hand and turned to face her husband. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "You bought this for me at Tiffany in Paris last year. It is a flawless diamond." "No, Megan," Jamal replied, stepping into the light of the lobby chandelier. "The necklace I bought you in Paris was a flawless diamond. The one you are holding is a high-grade cubic zirconia replica. I know this for a fact because I personally returned the original piece to the jeweler 4 months ago." The blood drained from Megan's face. Her mouth opened, but she could not form a single word. She stared at the glittering stones in her hand, as if they had suddenly turned into venomous snakes. "I sold it because I needed the cash," Jamal continued, his voice echoing with the clinical precision of a forensic auditor presenting evidence in a courtroom. "I needed the cash to cover the catastrophic shortfall in our primary joint savings account. The shortfall you thought I would never notice because you assumed I was too busy with tax season to look at our household ledgers." Jamal reached into the inner pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a folded, legal-sized piece of paper. He did not yell. He did not raise his voice. His absolute calm made the execution infinitely more devastating. "I am a forensic accountant," Megan Jamal said, holding the paper up. "My entire career is built on finding money that people are trying to hide. Did you really think you could secretly take out a second mortgage on our primary residence without me finding the paper trail?" Cynthia, who had been creeping down the hallway to follow Megan, stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes darted frantically between Jamal and her golden child. "I found the falsified loan origination documents 3 weeks ago," Jamal stated, his eyes locked onto Megan's horrifyingly pale face. "I tracked the disbursements. You forged my digital signature on the home equity line of credit. You drained $250,000 in equity from the home I bought for us. And you wired every single penny of it to your mother's accounts to cover her mounting credit card debts and keep her country club memberships active." Megan let out a high-pitched, breathless gasp. She looked at our mother silently, begging for an intervention, but Cynthia was physically shrinking against the wall, utterly exposed. "You committed mortgage fraud to fund your mother's delusions of grandeur," Jamal said, shaking his head in absolute disgust. "You risked my financial security, my credit, and my home just so Cynthia could keep buying designer handbags and pretending she was wealthy. You are exactly like Trent. You are both parasites feeding off the people who actually work for a living." "Jamal, please," Megan whispered, her voice breaking. "I was going to pay it back. Mom promised she had investments maturing. We just needed a bridge loan. I did not want to bother you with it. I love you." Jamal let out a short, harsh laugh. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. "Do not insult my intelligence, Megan," Jamal replied coldly. "You love the lifestyle I provided. You love the status of being a partner's wife. But you never loved me, and you certainly never respected me." He lowered the bank document and looked her dead in the eyes. "I went to the courthouse at 9 o'clock this morning," Jamal declared, his words landing like heavy stones in the silent lobby. "I filed for divorce. I also filed a formal police report regarding the forged mortgage documents. My lawyers have frozen all of our joint accounts. You have exactly zero access to my money. The illusion is over, Megan. You are completely broke and you are facing felony fraud charges." The impact of his words hit Megan with physical force. Her knees buckled. The fake diamond necklace slipped from her fingers, hitting the marble floor with a dull, worthless clatter. She collapsed onto the ground, burying her face in her hands, as loud, uncontrollable sobs racked her body. The golden child, the perfect daughter who had spent her life looking down on me, was now a weeping, destitute heap on the floor. Cynthia let out a sharp cry. She clutched her chest, her fingers digging into the fabric of her expensive dress. Her heart palpitations were visible as she stared at the ruined lives of her two favorite people. Her son-in-law was a broke embezzler facing prison. Her flawless daughter was a fraudster facing divorce and criminal charges. And Cynthia herself was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt with no one left to bail her out. Her entire toxic kingdom had burned to ash in less than an hour. My father stood beside me, his jaw set, watching the devastation without a single ounce of pity. Before anyone could say another word, the heavy soundproof oak doors leading from the street into the VIP lobby suddenly swung open. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the distinct authoritative sound of heavy footsteps. Everyone in the room froze, turning their heads toward the entrance. A tall, impeccably dressed man stepped into the lobby. He wore a sharp charcoal gray trench coat over a bespoke suit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. He exuded an aura of absolute terrifying power. Behind him stood two uniformed police officers, their hands resting comfortably on their duty belts. Marcus, my lead attorney from Sterling and Vance, swept his cold, calculating gaze across the room. He bypassed the weeping Megan on the floor and ignored Cynthia clutching her chest against the wall. He walked directly toward me, giving a sharp professional nod. "Good evening, Clara." Marcus said, his voice crisp and commanding. "I apologize for the intrusion, but the emergency injunctions you requested have been fully executed by the judge. We have the arrest warrants for Trent, and the asset freeze orders for Megan and Cynthia are officially active." Marcus turned his head, looking down the corridor where Trent was still pinned against the credenza by the restaurant security. "Officers," Marcus said, gesturing smoothly down the hall. "You will find your man right down there." The two uniformed police officers marched past Marcus without a single word. They walked briskly down the dim corridor and reached Trent, who was still pinned face down against the mahogany credenza by my security staff. The satisfying heavy metallic click of handcuffs snapping around Trent's wrists echoed down the hallway. It was the perfect background music for what was about to happen next. But the true masterpiece of the evening was just stepping out of the shadows of the VIP lobby entrance. He moved with the kind of quiet, predatory grace that only comes from decades of absolute authority. The man flanking Marcus was not just another lawyer or a wealthy investor. It was Nathaniel, my father. The last time Cynthia had seen him 20 years ago, he was wearing a faded flannel shirt and packing his meager belongings into a beat-up sedan. She had stood on the porch of our heavily mortgaged suburban home, screaming that he was a pathetic, cheap loser who would never amount to anything. She had kicked us both out into the rain, completely disgusted by his early business failures, taking me with him because I was just as worthless in her eyes. The man standing before her now was completely unrecognizable. He wore a charcoal bespoke Savile Row suit that draped flawlessly over his broad shoulders. A vintage Patek Philippe gleamed subtly at his wrist. Two massive stone-faced bodyguards trailed a respectful pace behind him. He did not just look rich. He looked like the kind of man who could buy the bank that held Cynthia's credit card debt just to fire the executives for fun. Cynthia's frantic, hyperventilating breaths hitched violently in her throat. Her eyes bulged so wide I thought they might pop out of her skull. She stared at Nathaniel, her brain short-circuiting, as it desperately tried to reconcile the penniless ex-husband she had discarded with the billionaire titan standing in my lobby. "Nathaniel." Cynthia gasped, her voice trembling instantly, stripping away all her haughty arrogance. "Is that you? You look incredible." She actually reached up to smooth her hair. Even in the middle of her financial ruin, with her son-in-law in handcuffs down the hall and her golden child sobbing on the floor, Cynthia's parasitic instincts kicked in. She saw extreme wealth, and her immediate animalistic reflex was to latch onto it. Nathaniel did not smile. He did not offer a polite greeting. He looked at her with the cold, clinical detachment of someone inspecting a foul stain on the bottom of his expensive shoe. "You have aged poorly," Cynthia Nathaniel stated, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that commanded the entire room. "I suppose living a life fueled by greed, envy, and stolen credit takes a severe toll on the complexion." Cynthia flinched as if he had slapped her across the face. Nathaniel. Please, she stammered, taking a tentative, desperate step toward him. You have to help us. Clara has lost her mind. She is trying to ruin us. She is freezing my accounts. You are her father. Talk some sense into her. We are family. Nathaniel let out a low, rumbling laugh that sent chills down my spine. It was a beautiful, terrifying sound. Family, he repeated, tasting the word like it was poison. You surrendered your right to that word 2 decades ago when you kicked a struggling man and an 8-year-old girl out into the street because we did not fit your delusional country club aesthetic. But I should actually be expressing my immense gratitude. He stepped closer to her, his towering presence forcing Cynthia to shrink back against the wall. Thank you, Cynthia. Nathaniel said, his words sharp and deliberate, cutting straight to the bone. Thank you for throwing us away 20 years ago. Because you were so eager to sever ties and chase a wealthy doctor who eventually dumped you anyway, you demanded a rapid, clean divorce. You waived all rights to future earnings just to get me out of your sight. Cynthia's eyes darted nervously. What does that matter now? She asked, her voice cracking under the weight of his stare. It matters because 3 months after you kicked us out, my first commercial development deal was approved. Nathaniel explained, his eyes locking onto hers with merciless intensity. Because of your absolute greed and impatience, my entire global real estate empire was never considered marital property. I built a multi-billion-dollar syndicate from the ground up, and you did not get a single red cent of it. You threw away a kingdom because you were too impatient to wait for the foundation to be poured. I watched the exact moment Cynthia's soul shattered. The realization that she had voluntarily discarded a billionaire to chase pennies was destroying her from the inside out. Her knees literally buckled, but she forced herself to stay standing by leaning heavily against the wall. Megan, still crumpled on the floor, clutching her fake diamond necklace, let out a fresh wail of despair as the true scale of what they had lost finally registered. Nathaniel. Cynthia whimpered, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face, ruining her expensive makeup. She took another step forward, raising her hands pleadingly. I was wrong. I was young and foolish. I have regretted it every single day. I loved you. I always loved you. Please, Nathaniel, we can start over. You can help me pay off these debts. We can be a family again. She lunged forward, reaching out to grab his arm, desperately attempting to play the role of the tragic, remorseful ex-wife seeking salvation. Nathaniel did not even let her fingers brush his suit jacket. With a swift, incredibly cold motion, he brushed her hand away, as if swatting a diseased insect. The sheer physical rejection made Cynthia stumble backward in shock. Do not touch me, Nathaniel warned, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You are a financial liability and a moral bankruptcy. I did not come here to save you, Cynthia. I came here to watch the trash get taken out. He turned his head sharply, looking past Marcus and gesturing toward the main entrance of the lobby. Officers, Nathaniel called out, his voice echoing with absolute authority. 2 more police detectives stepped through the glass doors, holding thick stacks of paperwork and silver handcuffs. They walked straight past my father and zeroed in on Cynthia and Megan. The 2 detectives marched straight past my father and zeroed in on Cynthia and Megan. They did not raise their voices, nor did they need to. The sheer authority radiating from their badges was enough to suck the remaining oxygen out of the room. The taller detective handed a thick, sealed manila envelope directly to my mother, while his partner handed an identical one to Megan. These are your official notices of asset forfeiture and frozen accounts, the detective stated, his voice flat and professional. You are both named as co-conspirators in an ongoing federal embezzlement and mortgage fraud investigation. I highly suggest you retain legal counsel before attempting to access any banking institutions. Cynthia stared at the envelope in her trembling hands as if it were a live grenade. Her perfectly manicured fingers lacked the strength to even open it. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her looking hollow and aged. Her golden life of country clubs, designer handbags, and stolen prestige was officially over. Before Cynthia could even formulate a pathetic excuse, the heavy footsteps of the private security guards echoed from the corridor. They marched into the center of the opulent lobby, dragging Trent between them, His custom-tailored suit was ripped at the shoulder. His hair was plastered to his forehead with nervous sweat, and his arms were pulled tightly behind his back. The silver handcuffs secured around his wrists caught the light of the crystal chandelier overhead. He looked utterly pathetic. A third NYPD officer, a seasoned lieutenant with a stern expression, stepped directly in front of him. Trenton Vance, the lieutenant, announced, his voice booming through the quiet lobby. "You are under arrest for grand theft, auto felony forgery, and wire fraud." Trent wildly shook his head, his eyes darting around the room in absolute panic. "What? No, there is a misunderstanding. I did not steal a car. I am a corporate executive. I make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. You cannot arrest me for grand theft auto." The lieutenant pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and held it up. It was a copy of the vehicle transfer title for the Maybach. "We have time-stamped security footage from the dealership and certified forensic analysis confirming you forged Clara Vance's signature on the title transfer documents for a $200,000 Maybach," the lieutenant explained coldly. "You illegally transferred ownership of a vehicle that did not belong to you in order to gift it to Megan Holdings. That constitutes grand theft auto. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Trent's knees gave out. The security guards had to physically hold him up by his armpits to keep him from collapsing completely onto the marble floor. The arrogant, untouchable man who had sat at my dining table an hour ago, demanding I apologize to him, was completely broken. He realized that his charm, his manipulation, and his corporate title could not save him. He was cornered. So he resorted to the final, most despicable tactic in his arsenal. He threw himself forward, dragging the guards down with him until his knees hit the hard marble floor. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, his expression twisted into a mask of pure agony. "Clara, please," Trent begged, his voice cracking loudly. "I am begging you. Drop the charges. I will pay back every single cent. I will go to rehab for the gambling. I will do whatever you want. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding." I stood perfectly still, looking down at him. I did not blink. I did not move. Trent let out a desperate sob and looked directly at the bundle wrapped securely in my arms. Clara, thinking of Leo Trent, cried, his voice echoing with sickening manufactured heartbreak. "He is only 7 days old. He is just a baby. He needs his father. You cannot let our son grow up knowing his dad is in a prison cell. Have mercy on our family. Please, Clara, for Leo's sake. Do not take a father away from his son." The sheer audacity of his plea sent a wave of absolute revulsion through my veins. He had the nerve to use the child he had neglected, the child he had treated as an inconvenience, as a bargaining chip, to save his own skin. I stepped closer to him. The police officers tensed, but my father raised a hand signaling them to let me speak. I looked down at Trent, my expression colder than the winter air outside. "You do not get to say his name," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, but completely devoid of mercy. "You do not get to play the devoted father when it is convenient for your survival." Trent stared up at me, his lip quivering desperately, searching my face for a single ounce of hesitation. He found nothing but ice. "You left your newborn son at a bus stop in 4-degree weather," I stated, enunciating every single word so the entire room, the police, my father, and the restaurant staff could hear exactly what kind of monster he was. "You abandoned him in the freezing cold so you could rush off to a luxury penthouse and gamble with your mistress." Trent flinched violently, closing his eyes as if the words physically burned him. "You are not a father, Trent," I continued mercilessly. "You are a parasite, and you are never coming near my child again. My lawyers will have the paperwork filed by tomorrow morning. I will ensure you are entirely stripped of all parental rights. You will not get visitation. You will not get a phone call. As far as Leo is concerned, his father ceased to exist the moment you walked away from that bus stop." "No," Trent wailed, thrashing against the officers. "Clara, you cannot do that. He is my son." "Take him out of my sight," I ordered, turning my back on him completely. The lieutenant gave a sharp nod. The officers hauled Trent up from the floor and dragged him toward the exit. He kicked and screamed, begging my mother and Megan to help him, but they were too busy drowning in their own ruin to even look at him. The heavy glass doors slid open, and the flashing red and blue lights of the waiting police cruisers flooded the lobby. Trent was shoved into the back of a squad car, the door slamming shut, finally silencing his pathetic cries. Inside the lobby, the silence returned thick and suffocating. Megan was still on the floor, her fake diamond necklace lying discarded near her designer heels. She watched Trent get hauled away to jail, and the reality of her own future finally crushed her. She had no money. She had no home. She was facing felony fraud charges, and the man she had conspired with was gone. She turned her tear-streaked face toward Jamal. He was standing near the doorway, buttoning his coat, preparing to leave. He looked entirely unaffected by her tears. Jamal, Megan gasped, scrambling onto her hands and knees. She crawled across the marble floor, her fingers desperately grasping at the hem of his trousers. Jamal, please wait. I am so sorry. I was stupid. My mother pressured me into it. I will fix this. We can go to counseling. I will do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. I love you, Jamal. Please do not leave me here. Jamal looked down at the woman he had loved and provided for. His face was a mask of perfect, impenetrable calm. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his suit and pulled out the folded divorce petition. He did not bend down to hand it to her. He simply let it go. The thick stack of legal papers fluttered through the air and landed with a soft slap on the marble floor, directly in front of Megan's face. Sign them, Jamal said, his voice flat and completely detached. My lawyers will contact you regarding the asset division. Do not ever try to call my personal phone again. He pulled his leg free from her grasping hands, stepped around her sobbing form, and walked smoothly toward the exit. He joined my father and Marcus by the door. Megan let out a gut-wrenching scream, burying her face against the cold floor as she clutched the divorce papers to her chest. Cynthia slid slowly down the wall until she was sitting on the ground beside her daughter, covering her face with her hands as she realized her life of luxury was completely extinguished. My father looked at the two weeping women on the floor, adjusted his bespoke jacket, and turned to me. Shall we go home, Clara? My father asked gently, offering me a warm, genuine smile. I looked at the broken, miserable people who had spent my entire life trying to tear me down. They had absolutely nothing left. Yes, I replied, holding my son close to my chest. Let us go home. The first detective grabbed Megan by the arm. He hauled her up from the cold marble floor with practiced mechanical efficiency. Megan did not fight back. She hung limply in his grip, staring blankly at the wall as he recited her Miranda rights. The charge was conspiracy to commit mortgage fraud. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs securing her wrists sounded like a final gavel strike in the quiet lobby. She was escorted out the glass doors, her ruined designer gown dragging along the ground, completely stripped of her golden child status. Then there was only Cynthia. She watched her perfect daughter get shoved into the back of a police cruiser. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated Cynthia's horrified face through the glass lobby doors. She slowly turned her head back to the center of the room. She was entirely alone. Trent was in custody. Jamal had filed for divorce and walked away. Megan was under arrest. Nathaniel had rejected her with surgical precision. Cynthia's eyes darted frantically around the room until they finally landed on me. She took a deep, shuddering breath. The absolute panic in her eyes instantly vanished, replaced by a terrifying manufactured warmth. She was a master manipulator, and having lost her precious son-in-law and all her money, she decided to play her final, most desperate card, the mother card. Clara! My sweet girl, Cynthia cried out, stepping away from the wall and moving toward me with outstretched arms. Look at what they are doing to our family. You have to stop this. You have the money. You have the power. You can fix all of this. I did not move. I handed Leo to my father, who cradled his grandson securely against his broad chest, watching the scene unfold with quiet vigilance. I stepped forward, closing the distance between me and the woman who gave birth to me. You owe me, Clara. Cynthia continued, her voice rising in pitch, thick with artificial tears. I carried you for 9 months. I fed you. I clothed you when your father left us with nothing. I sacrificed my youth for you. It is your duty as a daughter to take care of your mother. You are a billionaire. Paying off a few $100,000 in debt is pocket change to you. You have to write a check and make these police officers go away. It is called filial piety, Clara. You have to save me. I stared at her. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy required to stand in the wreckage of her own crimes and demand a financial bailout was breathtaking. She genuinely believed that giving birth to me functioned as a blank check to abuse me for the rest of my life. She expected me to fund the very lifestyle she had used to belittle me. Marcus, I said quietly, never taking my eyes off Cynthia. Never. Marcus stepped forward, retrieving a thin, bright red folder from his leather briefcase. He handed it to me. I held it for a second, feeling the heavy weight of the secrets hidden inside. I did not hand it to her. I dropped it. The red folder hit the polished marble floor at Cynthia's feet with a sharp, echoing smack. "Pick it up," I ordered. Cynthia looked down at the folder, then back up at me, her fake tears drying instantly. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling with a sudden, genuine fear. "That is the real reason I stopped speaking to you 10 years ago," I replied, my voice dropping to a dangerously calm register. "Go ahead. Open it." Cynthia hesitated, but the intense glare from the two remaining detectives forced her to comply. She bent down her knees, popping loudly in the quiet room, and picked up the red folder. She flipped it open. Her eyes scanned the first page, and the remaining color completely drained from her face. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. "Do you recognize those bank statements, Cynthia?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence of the lobby. "Do you recognize the American Express, the Discover card, and the Capital One account?" "Clara? This is ancient history." Cynthia stammered, frantically trying to close the folder and shove it back toward me. "You are rich now. Why are you bringing up the past?" I stepped closer, invading her personal space, forcing her to look me in the eye. "When I was 19 years old, I went to my university's financial aid office to apply for a basic student loan. I stated my words cold and precise. I had a perfect academic record. I worked 2 minimum wage jobs. I did everything right. But the loan officer looked at me with pure pity and told me my application was denied. He told me I had over $50,000 in defaulted credit card debt." Cynthia swallowed hard, taking a step back until her shoulders hit the wall. "I was going to pay it back to Clara. It was a family emergency." "A family emergency," I repeated, letting out a harsh, joyless laugh. I requested the itemized transaction logs from the banks. I saw exactly what those emergencies were. 2 weeks at a luxury ski resort in Aspen for you and Megan, $5,000 at a plastic surgery clinic in Manhattan, $10,000 on designer handbags and shoes. You lived like a queen while I scrubbed dishes in a campus cafeteria until 2 in the morning. I stepped closer, my voice vibrating with a decade of suppressed rage. "You stole my social security number. You forged my signature on 3 different credit card applications. You intentionally ruined your teenage daughter's financial future just so you could buy superficial garbage to impress your country club friends." When the collection agencies started calling my phone and threatening me with legal action, I was terrified. I thought I was going to jail. I dropped out of my honors program. I worked 3 exhausting jobs just to pay the minimum balances on debt I never accrued. I sacrificed my youth to pay for your greed. "Clara, please." Cynthia whispered, her hands shaking violently as she clutched the red folder against her chest. "I am your mother. You have to forgive me. Blood is thicker than water." I looked at the pathetic, cowardly woman cowering before me. She had spent my entire life calling me a disappointment. She had defended the man who tried to steal my house. But she had stolen my identity long before any of that happened. "You are not my mother," I said. "You are an identity thief, and I have reported this to the FBI." Cynthia dropped the red folder as if the cardboard itself was burning her skin. The glossy pages of credit card statements, forged applications, and default notices scattered across the polished marble floor. She stared at the papers, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish, unable to formulate a single coherent excuse. The two detectives standing near the entrance did not flinch, their stoic presence serving as a brutal, silent confirmation that my words were not an empty threat. The federal investigation was real, and it was already in motion. She looked up at me, her eyes darting frantically, searching my face for any trace of the obedient, terrified teenager she had bullied and manipulated for decades. She searched for the girl who used to cry in her dorm room, crushed under the weight of a massive debt she never accrued. But that girl was dead. Cynthia found nothing in my expression but reinforced steel and cold, absolute justice. Realizing that my empathy well was completely and permanently dry, Cynthia spun around. Her manicured hands trembled violently as she locked her sights onto the only other source of power left in the room. My father. Nathaniel stood tall and immaculate in his bespoke Savile Row suit, watching the execution with clinical, detached precision. He looked like a king surveying a conquered battlefield. Cynthia, stripped of her golden child, her wealthy son-in-law, and her stolen prestige, threw away her last remaining shred of dignity. She dropped to her knees right there on the cold marble floor. The expensive fabric of her designer dress pooled around her as she crawled a few inches toward him. "Nathaniel, you have to stop her!" Cynthia sobbed, her voice echoing shrilly off the massive crystal chandeliers above us. "She is your daughter. Tell her she cannot send her own mother to federal prison. I will pay it all back. I swear to God I will. Just write a check, Nathaniel. You have billions of dollars. What is $50,000 to you? It is nothing. Please, I am begging you. Save me." She reached out with shaking hands, desperate to grab the hem of his tailored trousers, desperate to anchor herself to his wealth. My father took a slow, deliberate step back, ensuring her grasping fingers grasped nothing but empty air. He did not look angry. He looked entirely indifferent, which was infinitely more devastating. "You are right about one thing," Cynthia, Nathaniel said, his deep, resonant voice carrying a lethal calm that silenced the entire lobby. $50,000 is absolute pocket change to me, but I would rather burn my entire fortune in an industrial furnace than spend a single penny saving you from the consequences of your own parasitic greed. Cynthia gasped a horrible, ragged sound, but Nathaniel raised a hand, silencing her completely. "In fact, my financial involvement with you goes much deeper than Clara's stolen credit." He continued, casually adjusting his expensive platinum cufflinks. "Last quarter, my real estate syndicate acquired a massive portfolio of distressed residential debt from a major commercial bank. We buy bad loans, restructure the assets, and liquidate the properties for profit." He tilted his head, watching the gears slowly turn in Cynthia's panicked, frantic mind. "Your primary mortgage was in that portfolio, Cynthia," he stated flatly. The lobby went dead silent. Even Megan, who was still sobbing on the floor, clutching her divorce papers, stopped crying and looked up in sheer horror. Megan had just lost her husband and her own home and was clearly planning to run back to her mother's mansion. The realization that there was no mansion to run back to hit her like a freight train. "You have not made a full legitimate payment on that house in 8 months," Nathaniel explained, his words landing like heavy, crushing blows. "You have been taking out fraudulent home equity lines through Megan just to cover the interest, and even that stolen money ran out. You have been living in a house you do not own, funded by money you do not have, pretending to be a woman you never were." Cynthia's hands flew to her face. "No," she whimpered violently, shaking her head side to side. "No, Nathaniel, you cannot do this. That is my home. My friends are in that neighborhood. My entire life is there. You cannot take my house." "I already have," Nathaniel replied, his voice devoid of any warmth or hesitation. "As the primary debt holder, I personally reviewed your file yesterday afternoon. You are in catastrophic default. There will be no restructuring. There will be no grace periods. There will be no extensions. My firm filed the official foreclosure paperwork with the city this morning." Cynthia let out a high-pitched, breathless squeak. Her eyes bulged as the absolute finality of his words crushed the air out of her lungs. She looked like a woman who had just been sentenced to the guillotine. "You have exactly 30 days to pack up whatever cheap, fake designer garbage you have left before the bank physically seizes the property," Nathaniel delivered the final fatal blow. Choke on your own pride, Cynthia. Enjoy living in the slums with your favorite daughter. Cynthia let out a guttural, agonizing scream that tore from the very bottom of her throat. She slumped forward, her forehead hitting the marble floor, completely defeated, broken, and bankrupt. She pounded her fists against the ground, weeping hysterically as the reality of her new life settled over her. She was going to lose her country club status. She was going to lose her mansion. She was going to face a federal judge for identity theft. She had absolutely nothing left. One of the detectives stepped forward holding a sleek business card. He dropped it onto the floor right next to Cynthia's shaking hand. Mrs. Vance, the detective, said, his tone purely bureaucratic. You will be receiving a formal summons regarding the credit card fraud investigation by the end of the week. I suggest you use your remaining 30 days in that house to find a very good defense attorney. Do not attempt to leave the state. Megan lay just a few feet away from her mother. The golden child, the perfect daughter, was staring blankly at the wall, her mind completely shattered by the evening's events. Her fake diamond necklace glittered mockingly in the bright lobby light, a perfect tragic symbol of her entire existence. They had spent their lives manipulating, stealing, and tearing me down to build their illusion of superiority. Now the illusion was shattered, leaving them utterly exposed and completely destitute. The luxurious VIP room, with its heavy velvet curtains, towering crystal chandeliers, and polished mahogany accents, had completely transformed. It was no longer a glamorous stage for their arrogance and entitlement. It had become the grand, beautiful tomb of their limitless greed. I looked down at the two weeping women on the floor. I felt no anger. I felt no pity. I felt absolutely nothing but the profound, liberating weightlessness of total closure. The toxic, suffocating chains that had bound me to this family were permanently severed. I turned away from the wreckage of their lives without a single backward glance. My father stood by the heavy glass doors, holding them open for me, a look of immense pride shining in his eyes. I held Leo securely against my chest, wrapping his soft blanket around him to protect him from the chill, and walked out into the crisp, clean night air. The crisp winter air hit my face the moment I stepped through those sliding glass doors, carrying the faint metallic scent of the city and the absolute certainty of freedom. I held Leo closer to my chest, feeling the steady, reassuring rhythm of his tiny heartbeat against my own. My father walked beside me in companionable silence, signaling his security team to bring the car around. I did not look back at the grand glass facade of the building. I did not need to. The chapter of my life containing Cynthia, Megan, and Trent was permanently closed, sealed shut by their own catastrophic greed. Exactly 1 month later, the final remnants of their existence were nothing more than digital notifications on my office phone. I sat behind a massive desk of polished black walnut, located on the 40th floor of the new corporate headquarters Nathaniel and I had acquired together. The floor-to-ceiling glass windows offered a commanding panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. The city stretched out below me like a grid of endless possibilities. I was no longer the exhausted, debt-ridden girl scrubbing dishes in a cafeteria, nor was I the emotionally battered wife trying to appease a parasitic husband. I was the chief executive of my own life. I took a slow sip of hot Earl Grey tea from a porcelain cup. The delicate clink of the cup returning to its saucer was the only sound in the vast, quiet office until the sleek, multi-line phone on my desk began to flash with an incoming call. I glanced at the caller ID. It was an automated routing number from the Rikers Island holding facility. I tapped the speaker button, letting the automated voice echo through the quiet room. You have a prepaid call from an inmate at the New York State Department of Corrections. To accept this call, press 1. To decline, press 2. I pressed 1 not out of any lingering affection, but out of pure clinical curiosity. Clara. Oh my God, Clara, please do not hang up. Trent's voice crackled through the speaker. He sounded entirely destroyed. The smooth, arrogant baritone he used to charm investors and manipulate women was completely gone. In its place was the nasal, frantic whining of a desperate man who had spent the last 30 days sleeping on a thin cot surrounded by concrete walls. Clara, you have to help me. Trent pleaded, his breath hitching as if he had been crying for hours. My public defender is useless. The judge set my bail at $500,000 because I am considered a flight risk. I have been in here for a month. It is a nightmare, Clara. The food is rotten. I am terrified. Please, you have the money. You can post bail right now. It is pocket change for you. I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, watching the morning traffic move like tiny metal ants on the avenues far below. I did not say a single word. Clara, are you there? Trent's voice spiked with raw panic. I know I messed up. I know I was stupid. But I am the father of your child. You cannot leave me in here. Megan will not even answer my calls. Her accounts are frozen. I have nobody else. If you just pay the bail, I can get out. I can fight these charges. We can go to counseling. I will do whatever you want. Please just wire the money. He was still bargaining. He still believed he could negotiate his way out of federal wire fraud and grand theft auto. He genuinely believed that throwing Megan under the bus and offering me empty promises of counseling would erase the fact that he abandoned his newborn son in freezing weather to gamble with a mistress. He had learned absolutely nothing. I reached out and pressed my finger against the smooth, illuminated disconnect button. The call cut off instantly, leaving the office in perfect, tranquil silence. I did not feel a shred of pity. I tapped a few buttons on the keypad, instructing the automated system to permanently block all future calls from that correctional facility. Trent was no longer my problem. He belonged to the state now. Before I could return to the financial portfolios spread across my desk, the heavy oak doors of my office swung open. Marcus walked in looking sharp in a tailored navy suit, carrying a sleek silver tablet. "Good morning, Clara," Marcus said, taking a seat in one of the leather guest chairs opposite my desk. "I have the final status updates you requested regarding the asset liquidations and the ongoing federal investigations." I set my pen down and folded my hands over the desk. "Let us hear it." Marcus tapped the screen of his tablet, pulling up a series of legal documents and time-stamped photographs. The foreclosure on Cynthia's property was officially executed at 8 o'clock this morning. The county sheriffs arrived to enforce the eviction notice. He handed the tablet across the desk. I looked at the high-definition photographs captured by the security team assigned to oversee the property seizure. The images depicted a scene of absolute humiliating chaos. Cynthia and Megan were standing on the dirty sidewalk just outside the towering iron gates of the estate. They were surrounded by a pathetic barricade of oversized Louis Vuitton luggage, hastily stuffed garbage bags, and loose items of clothing they had frantically grabbed before the sheriffs locked the doors. Cynthia was wearing a wrinkled silk bathrobe, her hair uncombed and frizzy-looking, nothing like the polished socialite who used to host charity galas in that very house. Megan was sitting on top of one of the suitcases wearing dark sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes, furiously yelling at her mother. Even through a silent photograph, the toxicity of their relationship was radiating off the screen. Our security detail reported that the argument on the curb was quite vicious. Marcus noted an imperceptible smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Cynthia was demanding that Megan use her connections to secure them a luxury hotel room. Megan was screaming back that her connections abandoned her the moment Jamal publicly filed for a fault-based divorce and froze all her corporate cards. I swiped to the next photo. It showed Cynthia waving her arms frantically, pointing a scolding finger at her golden child. Apparently, Cynthia told Megan to walk down to the luxury retail district and apply for a job as a perfume associate so they could afford rent for an apartment. Marcus continued narrating the miserable tableau. Megan responded by telling her mother that she was a former corporate executive and would rather live in a homeless shelter than work retail. She then told Cynthia to go get a job as waitressing. They were still arguing about who was too good for minimum wage labor when the police cruisers arrived to cite them for loitering on the private driveway. I handed the tablet back to Marcus, feeling a profound sense of closure. The two women who had spent their entire lives treating me like an indentured servant were now tearing each other apart on a public sidewalk because neither possessed a single marketable skill or an ounce of genuine work ethic. They had built their entire identities on the money of others. Stripped of that stolen wealth, they were empty, bitter shells. "What is the status of the federal charges?" I asked, shifting the focus from their social ruin to their legal ruin. "The United States legal system is proving to be remarkably efficient," Marcus replied, his tone shifting back to strict professionalism. The FBI has officially indicted Cynthia on multiple counts of identity theft, mail fraud, and mortgage fraud. They seized the red folder of credit card statements we provided. Because she utilized your social security number across state lines to secure federal loans, it triggered interstate commerce laws. She is facing a mandatory minimum of 7 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Her preliminary hearing is set for next Tuesday. Since she has no assets left, she has been assigned a public defender. And Megan, I inquired, thinking of the sister who had gloated about stealing my husband and my company. Megan is drowning in civil and criminal litigation, Marcus stated, checking his notes. Jamal's divorce attorneys are utterly merciless. They have filed motions proving that Megan Holdings was a fraudulent shell company used to launder money and hide marital assets. The judge completely voided their prenuptial agreement based on bad faith. She will not receive a single dime in alimony. Furthermore, because Trent implicated her in the theft of the Maybach, hoping to secure a plea deal for himself, Megan is now listed as a co-conspirator in the grand theft auto charges. She is currently crashing on the sofa of a former sorority sister, but that likely will not last long given her impending legal bills. The reality of their situation was stark and absolute. There were no loopholes left. There were no wealthy men left to manipulate. The law had moved in like a surgical blade, cutting away every fraudulent asset, every stolen vehicle, and every hidden bank account. They had played a high-stakes game of greed and arrogance, and they had lost everything. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, leaning back in my chair. "That will be all. Please instruct the legal team to continue cooperating fully with the federal prosecutors. I want no loose ends." "Consider it done," Marcus replied. He stood up, offering a respectful nod before turning and exiting the vast office, the heavy doors clicking shut behind him. I was alone again. The sunlight streaming through the massive windows warmed the polished wood of my desk. I picked up my smartphone, the screen illuminating brightly in my hand. I opened my contacts list. For years, these names had represented a source of constant anxiety, obligation, and fear. They had represented a family that only viewed me as a resource to be depleted. I scrolled down to the name Trent. I tapped the edit icon, scrolled to the very bottom of the screen, and pressed delete contact. A prompt popped up asking to confirm. I tapped yes. The name vanished into the digital void. I scrolled up to Megan, the golden child, the sister who believed she was entitled to my life. Delete contact. Yes. Gone. Finally, I scrolled to the contact labeled Cynthia, the woman who had given birth to me only to steal my identity, mock my struggles, and try to sell me out to protect her own vanity. I did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. Delete contact. Yes. I set the phone face down on the desk. A profound, unshakable peace settled over my shoulders. The anxiety that had plagued me for a decade was entirely gone. I stood up from my desk, smoothing the fabric of my tailored skirt, and walked toward the discreet door on the far side of my office. I opened it and stepped into the adjoining private nursery I had specially designed. The room was bathed in soft, natural light, filled with the gentle melodies of a lullaby playing from a corner speaker. My father Nathaniel was sitting in a plush rocking chair, holding Leo against his shoulder, gently patting the baby's back. Nathaniel looked up as I entered, a warm, genuine smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "He is finally asleep," my father whispered, standing up slowly so as not to disturb his grandson. He carefully transferred Leo into my arms. I looked down at my son's peaceful, sleeping face. His tiny chest rose and fell in a steady, calming rhythm. He was safe. He was loved. He would never know the cold manipulation of Cynthia, the toxic envy of Megan, or the parasitic cowardice of Trent. He would grow up in a world built on honesty, hard work, and genuine affection. "We have a board meeting in 20 minutes to discuss the new international acquisitions," Nathaniel said, quietly adjusting his cuffs. "Are you ready?" I brushed a soft kiss against Leo's forehead, feeling an incredible surge of strength and clarity. I placed my son gently into his crib, pulling a soft knitted blanket over him. I turned to my father, the man who had returned from the shadows to help me reclaim my life. I have never been more ready, I replied. We walked out of the nursery and back into the bright, expansive office, ready to face the future. The past was completely erased and the world ahead belonged entirely to us. The board meeting that followed was a masterclass in corporate dominance. Nathaniel and I sat side by side at the head of the massive obsidian conference table, seamlessly executing the acquisition of 3 major international development firms. I presented the financial restructuring plans with a ruthless precision that left the senior executives nodding in absolute agreement. I was not just Nathaniel's daughter. I was a formidable force in my own right, a woman who had forged her business acumen in the fires of adversity. When the final gavel struck, sealing the multi-billion-dollar merger, a wave of profound satisfaction washed over me. The exhausted, debt-ridden girl, who used to scrub cafeteria dishes until her hands bled, was officially dead. I was the architect of my own empire. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a brilliant array of crimson and gold across the Manhattan skyline, Nathaniel turned to me. "A victory of this magnitude requires a proper celebration," he stated, fastening his suit jacket. "I have already secured a reservation." When the armored Maybach pulled up to the familiar wrought iron gates, a subtle smile played across my lips. We were at Le Rocher, the exact restaurant where Cynthia had attempted to orchestrate my public humiliation and force me into financial submission just 1 month prior. Returning here was not an accident. It was a deliberate, calculated statement. We were reclaiming the space. The moment we stepped through the gilded glass doors, the general manager rushed forward to greet us. He bypassed the line of wealthy patrons waiting for tables, bowing respectfully, as he recognized my father and me. "Good evening, Mr. Vance, Miss Vance. It is an absolute honor to have you back. Your private suite has been prepared." He escorted us away from the noisy main dining room, leading us down a quiet, mahogany-paneled corridor to the most exclusive VIP room in the establishment. The suite was breathtaking. Crystal sconces cast a warm golden glow over a table set with fine bone china and polished silver. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an uninterrupted sweeping view of the city lights. I settled into the plush velvet booth, placing Leo securely in his carrier beside me. He was awake, his bright eyes taking in the glowing chandeliers with quiet fascination. Nathaniel ordered a rare vintage Bordeaux, and we toasted to the future. The tension that used to knot my shoulders during family dinners was completely absent. There were no backhanded compliments. There were no silent competitions. There was only genuine respect and the quiet confidence of 2 people who had conquered their respective demons. Halfway through our main course, a gentle knock echoed from the heavy oak door. It opened to reveal Jamal. He looked fundamentally transformed. The suffocating weight of Megan's endless demands and Cynthia's toxic manipulation had been entirely lifted from his shoulders. He wore a relaxed charcoal blazer, no tie, and his face was relaxed, completely free of the stress lines that used to age him. He carried a bottle of aged scotch, his posture radiating a profound sense of relief. "Clara," Nathaniel Jamal said, stepping into the room with a warm, authentic smile. "I hope I am not interrupting. The maitre d' told me you were dining here tonight, and I wanted to personally deliver the good news. Please join us," Nathaniel offered, gesturing to an empty chair. I poured Jamal a glass of wine, noting the easy, unburdened way he carried himself. "The judge signed the final papers this afternoon," Jamal announced, taking a seat and raising his glass. "The divorce is officially finalized." Megan tried to contest the prenuptial agreement, claiming emotional distress and attempting to seize my offshore accounts. But my legal team presented the evidence of her fraudulent shell company and her involvement in Trent's embezzlement scheme. The judge was absolutely furious. He voided her petition for alimony and ordered her to pay my legal fees. She walked out of that courtroom with nothing but the clothes on her back. I clinked my glass against his. "To freedom," I said. "To freedom," Jamal echoed, taking a slow, appreciative sip of his wine. He then shifted his posture, his expression turning professional but enthusiastic. "I also wanted to discuss the new commercial development project our firms are partnering on in the financial district. My analysts reviewed the blueprints you sent over, Clara, and we are ready to break ground by next quarter. We spent the next hour discussing logistics, supply chains, and architectural designs. It was a fluid, dynamic conversation between equals. This was my chosen family. We were not bound by the arbitrary accident of genetics. We were bound by mutual respect, integrity, and shared values. Jamal was no longer just the man my sister married for money. He was a trusted friend and a highly valued business partner. When Jamal finally departed to attend another engagement, he left behind an atmosphere of absolute victory. Nathaniel finished the last of his wine and smiled at me from across the table. "You built a remarkable life for yourself, Clara," my father said, his voice thick with genuine pride. "You took every stone they threw at you and used it to build a fortress." I smiled back at him, feeling a deep, resonating peace in my chest. I picked up Leo from his carrier, holding his warm, solid weight against my shoulder. He let out a soft, contented sigh, his tiny fingers curling into the fabric of my dress. I stood up from the table and walked over to the massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. Millions of lights sparkled below, stretching out into the dark night. Those lights represented millions of lives, millions of stories, and millions of struggles. I looked down at the cold, unforgiving streets of the city. Somewhere down there, Cynthia and Megan were likely wandering aimlessly, bitter and destitute, consumed by the toxic venom they had created themselves. Somewhere down there, Trent was sitting in a concrete cell, realizing his charm would never save him again. They had tried to break me, but their cruelty had only forged my armor. I held my son closer, staring at my reflection in the polished glass. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a protector, and a titan. Family is not an excuse for you to allow others to trample all over you. I thought the realization settling into my bones like iron. You do not owe loyalty to people who only view you as a resource. You do not owe obedience to people who actively plot your destruction. Sometimes amputating necrotic tissue is the absolutely only way to survive. The infection will spread if you do not cut it out completely. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. Do not cry when they throw you under the bus. Buy the bus company. Crush their illusions. Reclaim your power and never ever look back. I kissed the top of Leo's head, promising him silently that he would never know the sting of conditional love. He would grow up knowing exactly how much he was worth. Have you ever had to use the law to teach a toxic family a lesson? Share your story in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe to continue listening to stories about self-reliance and overcoming betrayal. Remember, a woman's greatest asset is her timely ruthlessness.